Somewhere in America right now, there is a truck sitting behind an old barn that could be worth more than a brand new luxury car. Not a truck from the 90s, not a truck from the 80s. A truck that was already old before the interstate highway system existed. A truck that hauled timber, worked ranches, survived floods, and eventually got parked when its owner decided it was worth nothing anymore. Some of those trucks are still out there, and the ones that survived have become something nobody who originally drove them ever expected them to be. They became garage gold. We are not talking about polished restorations that spend their lives at Sunday car shows. We are talking about collector markets that have discovered something real. That the trucks built before the 90s, the ones that nobody pampered, the ones engineered to be used and abused and run until they stopped, are now among the most valuable and most sought after vehicles in the entire classic market. And the rarest ones are getting harder to find with every passing year. 10 trucks, all of them older than the 1990s, all of them worth serious money today. And by the time we get to number 1, the word rare is going to feel like an understatement. Number 10, the Chevrolet Cameo Carrier, 1955. You have to understand what the American truck world looked like in the mid-1950s to truly appreciate how strange and brilliant this thing was. Every pickup on the road had a step-side bed, rear fenders that flared out, a narrow wooden bed platform, the same basic shape going back decades. Nobody questioned it. That was just what a truck looked like. And then Chevrolet did something that had never been done on a production pickup before. They built a truck with a full-width rear body, flush, smooth fiberglass composite bed sides that created a completely car-like profile from hood to tailgate. No exposed fender arches, no steps, no utilitarian edges breaking up the line. The Cameo Carrier looked like someone had stared at a Corvette and a work truck at the same time and simply refused to choose between them. Under the hood sat a V8, and the interior was trimmed to a level no working truck had come close to. This was not a farm truck. This was not a construction vehicle. This was Chevrolet announcing roughly 40 years before the luxury truck era that dominates today's market, that a pickup could be something more than a delivery platform with seats. The problem for Chevrolet, and the reason this truck became collector's dream, is that the Cameo Carrier did not sell the way they hoped. It was expensive. It was different. Farmers and contractors wanted something they could throw around without thinking twice, not something that looked like it should stay clean. Chevrolet built the Cameo Carrier in the mid to late 1950s, and total production across all model years was remarkably small compared with mainstream pickups. Today, clean original examples are genuinely rare objects. Restored versions can reach $40,000 to $60,000, depending on condition, originality, and trim. Exceptional examples have brought more at the right auctions. What was dismissed as an ambitious styling experiment when it was new is now one of the most visually striking trucks in the entire classic collector market. And this is only where the list starts. The rarity and the money only grow from here. Number 9, the Dodge Power Wagon, 1946. There is a story behind every great truck, and the Power Wagon story begins somewhere most trucks never go: World War II. The military needed rugged, capable, genuinely unstoppable four-wheel drive vehicles for terrain that would destroy anything less. Dodge built the WC series for that exact purpose, and by the time the war ended, those trucks had proved themselves in mud, mountains, jungles, and conditions that would be unimaginable for any civilian vehicle. When peacetime came, Dodge took everything they had learned in those years and put it into a truck that American civilians could actually buy. The 1946 Dodge Power Wagon was one of the first production civilian trucks to offer real factory 4x4 capability to regular buyers at scale. You could walk into a Dodge dealership, write a check, and drive home in a truck that could genuinely go anywhere. That was a genuinely new idea for the American market. Farmers bought them, ranchers bought them, oil field workers bought them, forest services bought them. Anyone who needed to reach somewhere that roads did not go bought one, used it hard, and depended on it completely. The Power Wagon became a working legend in the truest sense of the phrase, which is also precisely why finding a clean, original, first-generation example today is nearly impossible. They were not kept. They were used, pushed into creek beds, rolled in fields, left sitting in pastures when the next generation of equipment came along. A clean, well-preserved first-generation Power Wagon with original sheet metal and intact drivetrain is a serious collector piece. Restored examples can command $30,000 to $60,000 or more depending on authenticity and the quality of work. The rest-of-mod market, where builders update the mechanicals while preserving the original appearance, has pushed certain examples even higher. If someone's grandfather had one of these sitting at the back of a property and nobody touched it for 40 years, that is not old scrap. That is an asset worth investigating carefully. And if someone in your family ever sold one of these for almost nothing without understanding what it was, the numbers above explain exactly why that story still gets mentioned. And if military-grade engineering built for civilian life sounds impressive, what comes next took a completely different approach to making it a truck matter. Number 8, the Ford F-Series Ranger XLT, the 1970s. For most of American automotive history, trucks were sold and bought with exactly one promise: they would work. Comfort was beside the point. Style was an afterthought at best. You bought a truck because you needed to move things, not because you wanted to feel good while you were doing it. The Ranger XLT package changed that conversation quietly and permanently. Ford introduced the Ranger designation in the mid-1960s as a way to offer slightly more refinement on the F-Series. By the early 1970s, the Ranger XLT had become the most premium expression of what a Ford pickup could be. Two-tone paint, better interior fabrics, chrome trim that actually acknowledged the driver existed, an interior that recognized, maybe for the first time seriously on a truck, that the person behind the wheel might want to be comfortable. This was the first genuine step toward the lifestyle pickup. The idea that a truck was not just a tool, but a statement about the person who drove it. That transition seems completely natural today because it happened so thoroughly, but someone had to be first to suggest it, and the Ranger XLT was one of the earliest and most successful expressions of that idea. The 1973 through 1979 generation, the one enthusiasts refer to as the dent side or rounded square generation, is the most collectible today. These trucks have a visual identity that is completely their own. Clean examples have been appreciating steadily as the generation that grew up around them reaches collector age with real purchasing power. Good driving examples with the Ranger XLT package often bring $15,000 to $30,000 today. Particularly clean or low mileage versions have commanded more. The two-tone color combinations that seemed purely cosmetic when new are now among the most desirable features in the market. If you ever see one of these sitting on the side of a road with a handwritten for sale sign, you stop. You look twice. And if it is clean, you take a very serious moment to think about what you are actually looking at. Most people keep driving. The ones who stop are the ones who understand this list. Number 7, the Chevy and GMC Napco four-wheel drive conversion trucks. Most people who seriously love classic trucks know about Napco. Most people who do not love classic trucks have never heard of it. That gap in knowledge is exactly why these trucks are such extraordinary finds when they surface. Here's the situation. In the early and mid-1950s, before General Motors offered its own factory four-wheel drive setup on Chevrolet and GMC trucks, buyers who needed 4x4 capability had one legitimate option: the Northwestern Auto Parts Company out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Napco had engineered a conversion system, a front drive axle and transfer case setup that could be fitted to Chevy and GMC trucks either at the dealership level or through certain authorized distributors. This was not a crude backyard conversion. It was a legitimately engineered solution that produced a genuine four-wheel drive truck on a GM platform. Dealers in areas with real terrain requirements, mountain states, northern farming regions, logging country, stocked and sold Napco converted trucks as a specific product in their lineup. The total number of trucks that received a Napco conversion was never large. Once GM developed its own factory four-wheel drive offering, as the 1950s progressed, the commercial window for Napco narrowed and eventually closed. And of the trucks that were converted, virtually all of them were bought for serious working use and treated accordingly. They worked. They wore out. They were stripped for parts or scrapped without a second thought. A verified, original Napco converted Chevy or GMC from the 1950s is an extraordinarily rare find. These are trucks that historians and serious collectors consider genuine unicorns of the classic GM world. When documented examples appear, the prices reflect that rarity in ways that genuinely surprise people who are not already familiar with the story. Does anyone watching this know of a family that has one of these somewhere on a property? Because people who have spent years searching say that most surviving examples are still sitting exactly where they were parked decades ago, on farms and ranches where the original owners never thought to look at them twice. And the truck at number 6 proves that point better than almost anything else on this list. Number 6, the Ford Model TT 1917 to 1927. Somewhere in the middle of this list is the truck that arguably started the entire American commercial trucking industry. And the reason it lands here rather than at the very top is actually straightforward. The Model TT's historical importance is not a secret. It is in textbooks. It is in museums. The story is well told. What it is genuinely rare in complete running original condition. And that specific rarity is something the collector market has been recognizing with increasing seriousness and real money. Ford introduced the Model TT in 1917 as the truck platform built on the Model T's foundation. 1-ton rated capacity, a purpose-built commercial chassis that gave American small businesses, farms, delivery operations, and contractors their first reliable, affordable, high-production, motorized work vehicle. Before the Model TT, commercial motoring in America was either expensive, unreliable, or both. After it, the working truck became a practical reality for ordinary businesses across the country. More than 1 million Model TTs were built across the truck's 10-year production run. That sounds like a large number until you try to find a complete functional example in 2026. They were not designed to be kept. They were bought to work. They were worked until they broke, then abandoned, stripped, or left to the weather. The wooden body components rotted. The sheet metal rusted through. The ones that ended up in museums were the rare exceptions. The rest were simply gone. A properly restored Model TT in good working order is a legitimate collector piece that draws serious attention when it appears at auction. Restored examples can bring $15,000 to $40,000 or more, depending on completeness and quality of work. For a vehicle that most people instinctively think of as an ancient historical artifact, rather than a collectible investment, those numbers still surprise people who are not watching this market closely. It built an industry. That is not a small thing to hold in your hands. Number 5 is where heritage steps aside and something completely different takes the stage. Number 5, the Dodge Lil Red Express, 1978. This is where the list shifts gears, and I mean that in the most literal way possible. In 1978, America was deep in the emissions regulation era. Horsepower numbers on American cars had been squeezed for years by pollution standards and fuel economy rules. If you wanted to drive something genuinely fast in 1978, you had a narrow set of options, and almost none of them were trucks. Dodge found a loophole. Light trucks at the time were subject to significantly looser emission standards than passenger cars, which meant a truck could legally run an engine configuration that would never pass the regulations applied to a car. And Dodge decided to use that loophole in the most enthusiastic, least subtle way imaginable. The Lil Red Express arrived with a 360 cubic inch V8, a Holley carburetor, high flow exhaust, and the visual signature that nobody who has ever seen one forgets. Twin chrome exhaust stacks rising vertically out of the bed like a miniature 18-wheeler. They were not decorative, they were functional. And they were the truck's way of announcing exactly what it was. In period testing by automotive publications, the Lil Red Express became famous for being the fastest American production vehicle to 100 miles per hour. In 1978, a pickup truck was holding the top performance number in the country. Not a sports car, not a muscle car, a truck. Let that actually register for a second. The performance era everyone assumed was dead had not gone anywhere. It had simply moved to the segment where the rules were different. The look matched the attitude entirely. Wood grain trim, red paint, those chrome stacks rising out of the bed. This was not a truck trying to be subtle about anything. Production was limited to a degree that matters enormously today. Approximately 2,188 were built in 1978. The following year, production expanded to around 5,100 before the model was discontinued. Total production across both years was somewhere in the range of 7,000 trucks. 7,000 trucks ever in the history of the model. And most of them were driven hard. Today, a clean original Lil Red Express in good condition can sell for $30,000 to $50,000. Low mileage examples with original drivetrain intact and appearance preserved have drawn considerably more from the right buyers. This is a truck with a genuine performance story, a very specific look, a very limited number of survivors, and a cultural moment locked into it that never quite repeated itself. If you had bought one new in 1978 and kept it, what do you think it would be worth to you right now? Number 4, The Chevrolet 3100 Advanced Design, 1947 to 1955. Ask someone who has no particular interest in trucks to picture a classic American pickup. The odds are high that what they picture looks almost exactly like this. The Chevrolet 3100 Advanced Design Series, produced from 1947 through 1955, is arguably the single most recognizable visual symbol of the American farm truck. Rounded fenders, wide hood, that unmistakable cab profile that became the shorthand image for what a pickup was supposed to look like. It is the truck in old family farm photographs. It is the truck parked in the background of rural diners in movies set in the post-war era. When people feel nostalgia for trucks, they often feel nostalgia for something that looks like this, even if they cannot name it. Chevrolet built them in genuine volume throughout its production run, which is part of why survivors exist in larger numbers than some rarer models on this list. But large production then does not translate to easy availability now. They were work trucks, and they worked for it. They hauled livestock, lumber, grain, and building materials. They crossed fields and unpaved roads and sat in weather without shelter for decades. Nobody hauling grain in 1952 stopped to think about what this truck might be worth in 70 years. That was not the point. The point was getting the grain moved. The ones that were not maintained are gone. The ones that survived in original or genuinely restorable condition are now seriously sought after. The hot rod and custom community discovered the advanced design decades ago, and that recognition has pushed prices for the best examples into real money. A clean, original, unrestored barn find can bring $15,000 to $30,000, depending on completeness and condition. A professionally restored driver quality truck often commands $35,000 to $50,000. Restomod builds with modern engines and updated interiors have regularly exceeded $75,000 when the work is done right. But for the serious collector, the real prize is the original untouched example. The truck that sat in a dry barn since the early 1970s with the original paint still present in three-quarter condition. Those are the ones people talk about 4 years after the sale. Do you know where one of these is sitting right now? Because somebody always does. And the ones who act on that knowledge are the ones who end up with something special. Number 3, the Ford F-250 Highboy, 1967 to 1977. Before lifted trucks became lifestyle products, before the aftermarket suspension industry existed at anything close to its current scale, before any truck manufacturer thought to advertise ground clearance as a selling feature in their television commercials. Ford built something that had all of those qualities naturally, not as a statement, not as marketing, but simply as the result of building a four-wheel drive work truck the honest way, with a solid front axle, high suspension geometry, and the kind of clearance above the ground you get when you are genuinely serious about going places where roads do not exist. The F-250, with factory four-wheel drive from 1967 through 1977, sits notably higher than the later versions of the same truck. The Highboy nickname came from the enthusiast community assigned to distinguish these trucks from the lowered suspension geometry Ford adopted on its four-wheel drive models after 1977. The Lowboy followed, but the Highboy came first, and it earned its reputation entirely through genuine working capability. These trucks were bought by people who needed 4x4 for real reasons: ranchers working land in winter conditions, loggers on roads that do not appear on any map, contractors who got their equipment unstuck with a truck instead of waiting for a tow. They were tools that proved themselves in situations where failure simply was not an option. What makes the Highboy so compelling to collectors now is the combination of mechanical purity, visual presence, and genuine rarity. The high stance is not a modification. It is factory. The solid front axle is not an aftermarket upgrade. It is original engineering. And the engines, particularly the 360 and 390 cubic inch FEV8s available in the earlier production years, are considered among the toughest and most buildable power plants Ford ever produced. Clean, original Highboys with documented history have been selling for $35,000 to $60,000 and more as collector awareness has expanded in recent years. Exceptional low mileage examples have gone beyond that at private sales. And the number of truly original rust-free survivors is declining every year as more are restored, heavily modified, or simply deteriorate past the point of saving. A working class truck that became a collector obsession. That story has appeared more than once on this list. The Highboy tells it better than almost anyone else. If you have driven one of these, you already know exactly why people will not stop talking about them. And if you have not, that is a gap worth addressing. Number 2, the Ford F1. 1948, there is a truck that started the most successful vehicle line in the entire history of American automotive manufacturing, and it is this one. In 1948, Ford introduced the F-Series, not an update to an existing design, not a refinement of something pre-war, a complete purpose-built truck line with an all-new cab, a new frame, and an entirely new philosophy about what a commercial vehicle could and should be. Ford called it the bonus-built truck, the suggestion being that buyers were receiving more engineered value than they were paying for. By the standards of 1948, they were right. The F1 was the half-ton model, the most direct ancestor of the F-150 that has been America's best-selling vehicle for more consecutive years than most people can remember. Everything that followed, the redesigns across 8 decades, the generations within generations, the hundreds of millions of trucks sold since 1948, traces its lineage back to this cab, this frame, this specific design philosophy. That fact alone would be enough to make the F1 collectible. But there is something more precise. The actual first-year truck, the true 1948 F1, is the rarest expression of the beginning of that entire legacy. Ford was finding its footing with the new design. Production was solid, but these were trucks that went straight to work, and most of them worked until they were gone. Finding a clean original in the 21st century requires real patience and real searching in equal measure. Restored F1 trucks in excellent condition regularly sell in the $25,000 to $50,000 range. Exceptional examples with correct original colors, matching components, and clean original sheet metal have brought higher figures when the right buyer arrives. What makes them particularly compelling for collectors is that they represent a genuine beginning, not a tribute to a legacy, the actual first chapter of a story that is still being written today. If number 1 on this list is the ultimate collector unicorn, the F1 is the truck that made the entire modern American pickup industry possible. That is worth something real. It is worth quite a bit, actually. Number 1, the Diamond T Model 201. There is a moment in every serious conversation about classic trucks when someone says this name. Not everyone in the room knows it immediately. That is part of the point. The people who do know it react with a specific combination of recognition and genuine longing that very few trucks on Earth can produce. Diamond T was a Chicago-based manufacturer that had been building quality commercial vehicles since the early 1900s. They built to a standard that most truck manufacturers of the era simply did not reach. But in the mid-1930s, they produced something for the civilian pickup market that had no real equivalent. The Model 201 was not built for farmers who needed cheap, durable, replaceable transportation for rough daily use. It was built for a different kind of buyer entirely. A buyer with serious money, a buyer who wanted a truck that was as refined as the finest American automobiles of the era. The quality of the engineering was exceptional, even by the demanding standards of 1930s American manufacturing. The materials were premium throughout. The fit and finish were the kind you associated with luxury cars, not working vehicles. The styling drew fully from the Art Deco movement that was defining the best designed objects of that decade, applied to a truck in a way that had never been attempted at this level before. Chrome details that belonged in a showroom, lines that moved with genuine purpose and elegance. Diamond T marketed this truck to wealthy ranchers, large landowners, and businessmen who required utility but refused to sacrifice refinement to get it. In an era when most trucks were purely functional objects that nobody looked at twice, the Diamond T Model 201 declared that functional and beautiful were not mutually exclusive ideas. It made an argument that the luxury truck market has been remaking ever since, but did it first and did it with more style than most of what followed. Production was not large. Diamond T was not a mass manufacturer. They were a precision operation, and every Model 201 reflects that in ways you notice immediately when you see one. The number of complete original survivors believed to exist today is very small. When a genuine example appears at a significant auction or becomes available through a private sale, it draws attention from collectors who have been waiting years for exactly that opportunity. Excellent examples of the Diamond T Model 201 can bring serious collector money, and the best documented trucks with complete original components can go considerably higher when the right buyer and the right truck end up in the same room at the same time. This is not the truck you find every year at a regional show. This is the truck you find once in a lifetime of searching, if you find it at all. That is what makes it number one. These 10 trucks did not become valuable because they were preserved carefully from the beginning. They became valuable because the opposite happened. They were built to work. Most of them worked until they could not work anymore, and then they were forgotten. The farms changed hands, the ranches were sold, the old machines sat in weather, in barns, in fields, in places where nobody thought twice about what they might mean someday. What survived did so largely by accident. A barn that never flooded, an owner who happened to park something under a roof instead of leaving it in the open, a grandson who decided not to scrap the thing in the corner because it seemed like a waste. That accidental survival is exactly why a truck built when Eisenhower was still a general can be worth more in 2026 than a brand new vehicle sitting on a dealer lot. Rarity created by time and hard use, combined with the nostalgia of a culture that remembers what these machines meant, combined with serious collector money that has discovered this market, is a combination that only moves in one direction. The question worth sitting with is whether one of these trucks exists somewhere near you right now, behind a building, under a tarp at the edge of a property, inside a barn that has not been fully opened in 20 years. Most people walk past them and see old metal that should probably be cleared away. A few people stop, look at what is actually in front of them, and see something else entirely.